This program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch Mojo and the Inside Mojo podcast. The final episode of the Inside Mojo podcast, for now at least. We'll see what the future holds, and we'll be talking about podcasting projects today. But I am your host, Rob, and with me as always, for the past 20 weeks, Ashkan Karbasfrooshan, WatchMojo's CEO and co-founder. What's new, Ash? We're doing this on a Monday, special day and time, because you were quite busy last week. So what were you up to?
So last week was week 4 of 4 straight weeks that I was in New York City. Again, radical transparency. So back in January, I could see that there was a lot of companies who were realizing that like YouTube was just going to go parabolic in the years and decade to come. And they realized that they were kind of underrepresented in terms of being on YouTube, and WatchMojo being a pretty successful business that really was YouTube centric. We have a lot of good relationships with other companies. They started to reach out, spoke to a lot of investment bankers and advisors I had. And I was like, look, we've done this for 20 years independent. 5 years ago, we brought on a private equity firm, leveled up the governance. But I was like, I see the wind is shifting and there's a strong sentiment. So in March, gave Oakland's De Silva Phillips a mandate to speak to the companies that were reaching out to us, and they reached out to more people. And then last week was really like the end when LOIs were due, but there were some like last meetings, some last companies at the 11th hour that were like, ooh, we didn't know that WatchMojo may transact. And it is weird to talk about it, but again, there's not there's a lot of articles on M&A and stuff, but there's very little candid, transparent kind of feedback for younger entrepreneurs. So we have the pieces of paper as of Wednesday, and it was a very, very successful process. I actually posted a tweet very transparently. I think Sunday morning I came back. I was supposed to come back Friday, and as much as I love Air Canada, and we'll talk about Air Canada as well. I mean, again, I understand the complexities of air travel. It was the third of 4 trips where, for one reason or another, my plans got derailed. So I ended up staying Friday night. I came back Saturday. I'm still a bit disoriented and tired. But yeah, so I wasn't going to do it from like LaGuardia type of thing or a hotel room. So we're doing it today, obviously. Yeah. And so, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about, I think you want to touch about the podcasts, the next ones that we do. This Inside Mojo was, I guess, not the second. It would be the 3rd or 4th or 5th podcast. You're doing one on UAPs. I still call them UFOs. And so we wanted, in typical WatchMojo style, we kind of like asked the team and asked the audience, and our producer of this show, Yvonne, will join us in a few minutes. So we're going to look at some feedback, very transparent, just to show people how we decide things and make decisions collaboratively. And then, yeah, switch gears, talk a little bit more about the process and how I'm approaching that. Again, obviously, we're going to respect confidentiality. I don't want our investment bankers to have a heart attack, but I do think it's good because once you actually have a lot of options, how does an entrepreneur decide to do, first of all, something or nothing? And then if you do something, how do you go about it? And then, yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about my little idea that I shared with Air Canada, which was, like I said, in life you could be, I've obviously studied Alexander the Great and Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great, builder, leader, diplomat. Alexander the Great, commander, soldier, destroyer of everything he touched to build his empire. So obviously my disposition, my nature is more Cyrus. So at first I was really upset, and given that I like the law, I was like, oh, wow, I understand now why firms, like people launch class action lawsuits, but that's not my default mode. I'm not going to attack one of Canada's leading corporations but I do think sometimes you do need to take a militant stand to get corporations to show some humility in general. I won't talk about Air Canada, and come to the table. But ultimately, I think what I proposed, long shot as it may seem, was actually, I thought, a really, really good idea. So we'll talk about that later. But you have the floor. I know you want to talk about podcasts. Yeah, but it's going to be a pretty jam-packed 45 minutes or so of programming. So let's go. It's like drop the gloves. Let's go,
It
man.
will be. Well, I mean, before we get into the new podcast ideas, I just wanted to kind of like wrap a bow on this 20 episode run that we've done for Inside Mojo, because in many ways, this is kind of like the pilot project for any other podcast that may come up as part of the debut of the Inside brand of podcast shows that we're kind of developing. And so, yeah, we wanted to do 20 episodes for anyone who hasn't been following along to represent WatchMojo's 20th anniversary.
And YouTube's 20th anniversary
Because they coincide with one another. And so in that way, is pretty revealing, because we covered pretty much every step that the company has taken since its inception. And it's a cool way to kind of like springboard forward into the future. So a lot of us at the company feel that podcasting is part of that future. And so we had an extensive meeting led by our colleague Yvonne, who Yvonne, if you would like to join us.
Face reveal. There we go.
There he is.
Every single episode behind the scenes, probably the most valuable person involved in this project. If I'm being
I know this
calm
sounds
down.
really
Let's calm
cheesy.
down.
I know this sounds really cheesy, but very quickly. So Yvonne, we met like what 7-8 years ago.
Yeah,
You came to
something like that.
Montreal, and it's when we were launching WatchMojo Espanol. He was part of the initial team in Mexico. We've since expanded to Argentina. We're building probably a team in a few other countries. We'll get to that later. But the point I want to make is, working on projects as a CEO is amazing, because you get to really see the talent you have. You know, like obviously Yvonne's an all-star. I knew Rob's an all-star, you know. And so, but when you actually work with people, it's a bit when you're on a pitch, you know, playing football, soccer, or whatever, where you actually see people, what they do and what they bring. And it actually gives decision makers more of an impetus to say, you know what, we can do this. Because when we started, let's say in December, when again you emailed me and Young Deuces emailed me, and they came into this concept, I would have been like, yeah, I believe in podcasts, but do we have the right people? You know, without the right person, no project takes off. So that's the other thing that I do want to stress, not just to the WatchMojo team, but anybody watching, any entrepreneur, any employee, is you do have to put your neck out there. You do have to put your hand up, because generally speaking, leaders want to greenlight projects. Leaders are always looking for ideas. We're looking for growth. We're looking for innovation. But if we don't have the right people, then you get a bit trigger shy, right? So again, Yvonne, thank you for everything you've done on this show, Espanol. I know you're taking on a lot of other projects. So anyway, I'll shut up. So yeah, I'll just say it that when we first had a workshop internally about podcasts, I did feel like, oh my God, I know what will happen. A lot of people are going to have good ideas, but it'll be like comparing apples to oranges. So I like kind of, you know, matrices. I like ways to get everybody speaking the same language. So I had kind of, Inside Mojo was a reflection of that I was like, you do need certain things: authenticity, differentiation, you know, expertise. You also need something that could be replicable. I don't like doing 300 podcasts in perpetuity. I like that kind of open, close-ended 20 episodes or whatever number is. So yeah, I think we want to share some data.
Cue the graph.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, well, it was your idea, Ash, actually, to start this little bit of a checklist and ranking for each one of the projects that we presented for the podcast. And this is our top 5. There were a lot of projects in there from the staff and from the people that wanted to participate. The number 5 right now is Business of Everything, which is basically, as the title suggests, based very much on Inside Mojo. So it's basically talking about the business of absolutely, like, war or cartoons, the MCU, movies, etc., and trying to
trading cards, sports
that.
cards, stamp
Exactly.
collecting, wine. Like it's, you pick. Obviously, we need to. Again, we're curators, so we need to curate what those episodes are, themes are. But this was, I mean, yeah. So the framework was something I presented to the team. But I mean, this was, I think, your idea, if I'm not mistaken. And I think this one,
trying to divide it like that, yeah, just organize it a little bit more. Try to get a deep sense of where we're at with each one of the projects, the opportunity for each one of the projects, if it's going to be replicable, if it's gonna, if it's gonna be a return on investment, which was like really a hard point to get to with each one of the projects. But I think we did it, and I think it worked. We got really good insights for the type of projects that we want to make. All of them very much dependent on the core, like, initiatives at heart, which is, you know, an archive. We are leaders, we are experts, and all that. So that's what we try to bring to the table with the podcast ideas.
Yeah, and what I like here, and again, you know me, I'm like, it's rare that I actually throw my hat in the ring as talent. I usually am more CEO or whatever, like a CXO behind the scenes. But here, I mean, I did, you know, you had said Ash could also be like a contributor, but I think this will be really good if we match, let's say, and one of the people, others, but then like an expert, you know. So if you're talking about the sports cards, obviously you go bring the guru of sports cards,
Exactly,
or a historian or whatever. So this was the fifth one. Okay, so
yeah, this is number 5. Just to be clear, you were like as in a movie, you were like the role was like written for you. So let's just, you know, let's keep that.
Let's move on. Let's
all right. The next one is Sound Mojo Radio. As you guys probably know, we do have a Sound Mojo channel. We had a Sound Mojo channel, which I am a huge fan of, even before I came into the to work for WatchMojo. And it's always something that I wanted to bring back in some way. I mean, Joe, who's also a collaborator for us here on the podcast, very much an inspiration. And you don't see the behind the scenes, but every time before we start one of these podcasts, there's a talk about music and albums and bands and everything. So that's this is one way that we wanted to bring that back.
And I think here again, what's interesting is drafting off the massive catalog of top 10 lists per artist, or also by genre. So there's so many ways to skin the cat. You could literally open up and talk. I'll use again Ozzy, you know, number 2, Diary of Madman, number 1, Over the Mountain. It was probably Crazy Train, but then actually go deeper and then have the conversation. You know, was Jakey Lee really underrated? You know, was he actually the best? Not that I think Randy Rhoads was probably arguably the best, hands down. But my point is, it does lend itself to a lot of ways that we could establish right away our credibility, authority because of our back catalog. And then it's something extra that is really tangential to our core. So this I've always liked. And again, like I think the votes speak for themselves. I mean, I voted 5 across the board almost. But,
yes, you did.
And I like how DS, who we know is, he put 0.
I noticed that. A lot of zeros from
Dave. Yeah, I don't know.
Dave.
So we'll go take him in a back alley.
Some
naysayers. Yeah.
Good fellas, inspired conversation.
Also with this one of the advantages we have is that we can go back and forth. We can react to new albums, new artists, which is something we did a lot of in Sound Mojo itself. So again, this one lends itself to just speak to our authority on music right now.
Yeah, and one thing that I like too about this is that Joe already has built a considerable number of relationships from the previous iteration of the Inner Sleeve podcast. So, you know, he had some impressive guests on that show.
Steve Vai, baby, Steve Vai.
Yeah, if we can translate that to this one, then I think we'd have something special.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting with this is you don't just need the musicians, although that's great, is you could actually start inviting, you know, like the editor of Billboard, or, you know, somebody from Rolling Stone or Pitchfork or whatever, because you're basically starting with the list that we've done just to kind of set the stage and then going really deep. So yeah, no, this I'm not surprised was in the top 5 as well.
Yep. Number 3 for us is this little project called Mojo. It's basically going deep inside the questions that come out of the list that we have. So one of the things we've been doing a lot of right now is the coverage for the Diddy trial. And there's a lot of questions that come.
I didn't notice you guys have been.
No, not really. It's just 2 videos.
Is that sarcasm? Because we've been doing so much of it.
But
nobody picks up on my sarcasm, by the way. Nobody.
You need that little sign from the Big Bang Theory that says sarcasm. One of the questions that comes out of there is, can you differentiate the artist from the art, right? So we bring in PR people, we bring in experts, we bring in sociologists, people that we can interview that can answer these questions that both we as staff have who make these lists, and the audience can also have after watching one of our lists. So again, deep dive into our list, using that to our advantage, using that to really build on the catalog that we already have and set us up as the experts and opinion makers for some of the, you know, hardest questions that come up from our list. Because we usually don't get the opportunity to deep dive into them that much because we have a set number, and, you know, we need to keep that in line. But this is a great opportunity for us to have, and we can go across the board on our catalog with Miss Mojo, with Miss Mojo, with Mojo Plays, you know, even some of our vault channels, and obviously our main channel. So,
but even like Mojo Travels, which I am looking at going back, like Mojo Travels. Let's say you do the top 10 Greek islands. There's no reason why. Let's say if number 1 is Crete, which which is could be it's the size of a country, basically. You could then do a podcast where you actually go again deeper into just discussing Crete, like what to do a week in Crete, or like, you know, whether Mykonos should even be counted as a Greek island as an experience, because it's more like South Beach. It's more like a different thing. So yeah, I think again this makes a ton of sense, and anything that builds, like, you know, that drafts off and is tangential to our core, it's like it ups the chances of success, because ultimately everybody works hard. You want to make sure that these projects, and we said, is the ROI there. It may not be, you know, we never prioritize profit. We think of other things first. But I mean, you ultimately want to reward your team who's working hard on these things. So
exactly. And if you get the quality down, then that's going to get reflected into the ROI. And this one is very much dependent also on the passion, because we do have a lot of passionate, you know, fans and people on the team who make these lists. You could probably tell from all the lists that we have, but yeah, that's definitely banking on that as well. All right, number 2 on our little ranking here is unranked, which is ironic, but this one is basically we called it in the workshop, we called them long narrative with short episode spans. So this one is basically thought of as 3 long episodes that are more journalistic or documentary in style, because that is something that is very much it's something that we've done before as a documentary for the channel, and it's just trying to bring that into the podcast space. So again, we might not be able to have a list where we deep dive into OnlyFans, for example, but this one is going to give us an opportunity to not only do that, but do it through 3 different perspectives, right? The Miss Mojo perspective, the core perspective, and the Context TV perspective, for example, for the business side. So this is going to give us that opportunity. It's short-lived, meaning it's just 3 episodes. They're long. We get experts. We get the archival footage, and it's going to be a, you know, an all-around good time. And it gives it that journalistic quality that we look for most of the times in our list. So this one I'm really excited about.
Cool. Yeah, no, I agree. Another good idea.
Number 1 is one that our partner Sean brought up, which is everyone was a fan of this idea. It's a date. It's basically bringing everything historical and history to Mojo and everything we like, and that's going through dates, in important dates in history, right? That's the general idea for this one, which makes sense. It's logical. It has an amazing through line, and I think it's going to work great. And apparently everyone thinks so as well on the spreadsheet. So that's another cool idea that we had for that.
So what's crazy is when you've been at this racket for 20 years, what's old is new. Like there's always something you've done in the past that you're bringing back in a similar but different iteration. So we started off with like this day in history, born on this day. And I mean, it was very basic compared to what we're describing here, but it's just funny how it's like leveling up something we've done, just upping the quality, which speaks to that analogy of ESPN, MTV in the 1980s, very scrappy. The cast would do their own makeup. They didn't really have rights to anything. And then 10 years later, they were like, you know, the gold standard of programming, but like unrecognizable to the people that were there on day one. So good stuff. Okay, so what I'd like to do again, we should have usually had this conversation last week, is we'll get again some of these folks, you know, in a room. Would open it up to the whole company, because the workshop was all hands on. Anybody can chat, and then I think we'll take everybody through the data, and then we'll give everybody the opportunity so that if there was one that got less votes, speak up. Just because these fine 10 people voted this way doesn't mean that there's not a gem. But then basically, as I said, is the timeline to say, okay, we're probably not going to be able to do all of them. Mm-hmm. And then realistically, you know, personnel, like, I mean, we're all interested in these things, but we still want to keep doing all the other things. So we'll look at, you know, if we need to recruit. And then just one thing that wasn't here, because one, I'm not sure if it would be actually a podcast or more of a WatchMojo style B-roll, but not necessarily top 10. So I will probably do something, and again, the timeline, this could be the 3rd thing. It could be a year from now, but probably not a year. I will actually do, I won't lie, something like Inside Iran. But the reason why I'm not sure if it will be a podcast is because, again, Iran is very thorny, very problematic. You would usually want to bring on experts who are, you know, teachers somewhere, professors, you know, PhDs, authors. But it's like you're automatically alienating half the audience, because that person said or did or took a picture or liked something 8 years ago, 18 years ago, 40 years ago, and everybody's just going to assume that it's like, oh, this person has this bias. Whereas most other cohorts are not like that. Like, yeah, if you're watching Fox, you understand there's like, oh, the Republican view, the Democrat. But Iran is a bit more intense for many reasons that we'll discuss inside Iran. But yeah, so, and I just want to, it's interesting that when we started this, I like to get shit done. I had written a bunch of articles on Iran, both on Context is King and X, more historical, more like, just explaining current affairs. And then we started publishing some videos on WatchMojo and Miss Mojo. We're now going to be launching, working title is Persian Mojo. It's not perfect, but Iran Mojo is taken, which are going to be more niche or niche videos. So instead of the general ones that make sense, it's like a report card. What have you done this term? But look how much more. Then the Inside Iran podcast or series, which I already have the 20 topics. The Aria music album. I'm up to 15 songs. I also have 2 originals. I have, since doing all this, somebody emailed me regarding kids' books. I myself will take all of the articles I've written and bring on somebody to just turn it into some book, because there's a lot there in terms of like going back 5,000 years to now. And then there's 2 things that, and then Aria was initially going to be a concert. That concert, the set list, actually became the Miss Mojo video, which then became Aria the music album. So just the way, like as an entrepreneur, to just, tinker. And then last but not least, this is more 2026. I call them funds. I don't know if they're funds or just, envelopes. One is going to be tentatively called the Nader or Nader Fund, which is more like scholarships and bursaries to Iranian students to be able to go study everywhere around the world. But that's a bit thorny. We'll explain later, not now. And then the other one is tentatively called the Cyrus Fund. And that's more for startups and creators, where you basically get like a little bit of a seed to be able to just devote yourself to building either a product, like a tech product, an app, or if you want to start producing content, which we will then distribute. So this is just like,
Stay tuned, I guess.
Lots planned.
All right. So we covered those things. You want to switch gears? Anything else?
Shifting gears. So
all right, I'm going back to my corner right now.
Oh, no, you're welcome to stay.
All right. I can stay. Cool.
So in January, you began a certain process, Ash, that you've
strategic mission, to Vladimir Putin,
exactly, and it's basically been concluded in the month of May. So would you like to walk us through?
Okay, again, most companies, first of all, would never do this, and this is the bullshit of M&A. Whenever a company actually does something, they're like, we're not, or like it's like the company's running out of money. It's a very weak balance sheet. Their income statement stinks. And they're like, nope, we're good, when they're desperately. So in our case, very candidly, we've been at this for 20 years, and this year is going to be year 5 that we've had our private equity investor. And knowing, being a finance guy, you want to explore options when you really don't have to, right? So if you're profitable, you're debt-free, you got cash at the bank, but you're like, okay, generally private equity firms have a 5-year time horizon. They invest to make money. They obviously like the products and the people, but they have a fiduciary duty to their limited partners, their investors. So I was like, look, just because, I think we're entering our 3rd growth period, I really love all the projects we're doing, and it's not necessarily the best time for WatchMojo in a silo to explore this. I was like, we're getting so much interest that now is actually the time, because then we can pick the best home. It's not rocket science. And that's how I think entrepreneurs should look at it. You are really as a function at the mercy of the macro. So even if you're not doing as well as you would like, nothing about us in general, if the headwinds are so strong that like a plane you can take off, you should explore your options. If you are crushing it, but interest rates are shooting up, inflation's off the chart, there's a recession coming, there's nuclear holocaust threatening back and forth, then you should probably not, because there's too much uncertainty. So even if you have personally as a business a lot of tailwinds behind you, there's just too many headwinds that you don't control, right? So we started to talk to a bunch of banks. We hired a bank. And what's interesting, and I posted this as a tweet, every time going back, 13 years now, we always had interest, but it was very one company. Even when we hired a bank a few years ago, there weren't that many companies that in the end, even if they had interest, even if they showed intent, there were very few companies that then would move to action. because they were like, well, we'd rather if you were on WatchMojo.com. And I was like, yeah, but the future is YouTube. And I would tell them then that search engines would get, decimated. I did not foresee like the rise of ChatGPT or like Google just putting all the content on, its search results page. But my point was, this time, what was really, really different was we just had a lot more parties at the table, which to me...
Can I stop you there? Why do you think that was? I know you've mentioned that companies only recently woke up to the idea that YouTube is like the juggernaut of online video and that you need to be there. Is that like the main reason, or are there other elements to this?
Two things. Well, to be fair, also, again, I'm very hard on ourselves. In 2017, and I write about this in a tweet that I think I put in the YouTube or my Twitter, and I'll put after the video so I'm not distracted. In 2017, we had 5 companies show interest, or 5 groups. So it was 2 funds and 3 companies that showed an interest. I didn't have a bank then, but the problem was I did each conversation sequentially. Whereas you're better off having a start date and end date, give everybody clear parameters, and then you create more tension. But I thought that was a bit like not classy. I felt like I was cheating around. So I was like, I'll give you an opportunity to settle down with us. But then the other parties would take advantage of my diplomacy, or frankly, that was it. Like they would at the end put in like a clause that would materially change the terms. Whereas you don't do that if you know you're competing with others. Now, to answer your question, again, yeah, the macro prevails. I think it's just that after COVID, YouTube's growth rate shot up. And yes, with ZERP, they also faced a bit of headwinds, but ultimately the long-term CAGRs, like the cumulative, aggregate growth return or whatever, like just like your average return over a long period of time, is crushing it. And YouTube makes more revenue, ad revenue, than any other broadcast or cable channel, any other tech company. Not any other tech company, that's not true. It makes more advertising revenue than other tech companies. So there's a lot more companies that recognize that they will never be able to build themselves on YouTube, and they can't really buy. Even Mr. Beast, who to his credit has built a company, if Mr. Beast is not there, nobody cares about the rest. But if Ash disappears, and it's funny, during the process, a lot of them, the parties would leave the room at the end and tell our banker, they're like, yeah, if Ash is not there, we're not doing it. But they were also like, he's got a great team, but at least initially he's got to be there. And I was very kind of like false, modest, or naive, thinking they may not even want me. But I realized, like, as an insurance policy, symbolically, they're like, no. The first year we're shackling you to the radiator. But then that Goodfellas scene where you come in and they're like, Ash, we have this new guy. You're no longer here. But it's really the macro. They realize YouTube is the main AVOD platform. It's the battleground for media and entertainment. And if you don't have exposure to that platform, well, over time, you're not going to grow as fast as the industry. So, and then again, like, I'm a professional. Yes, I will write something to Air Canada that seems a bit unhinged, but that's a shtick. Like that's that part. I'm going to consider class action. That's not a shtick. I like law, and I think there's a valid beef there. But again, not because I'm seeking financial compensation. I don't care about that, because I like to be very consumer representing of people, right? I'll land on this, and then I want to talk a little bit on a quadrant of how I would look at it. With Air Canada, like it's, there's a show I'm developing called The Fixer. I think we talked about this, where you're kind of like a vigilante representing customer service people. So I like that. I've always liked representing the people. Give me your downtrodden, your oppressed, your minorities, you're blind, you're deaf, you can't walk, I'll carry you. Like I've always been drawn to that. And I could speak the lingo, right? Like if some companies, like when Air Canada was like, too bad you didn't read these terms and conditions, I was like, that is a contract of adhesion. It holds no water, zero value in like an actual dispute. And a class action lawsuit is if really you got like a common beef, not like, they lost all of our luggages, but more, we have this policy, like I said, that if you skip out on Montreal LaGuardia, we automatically cancel LaGuardia Montreal. No, that's your policy. That's a common policy that has affected people adversely. Okay, if I had to pay $300 and pay more for a ticket, there's a lot of other stuff. Like, let's not talk about Air Canada. Let's pause it, because it's also we're going the direction I didn't want to go.
We've touched a sensitive spot, I think.
I'm passionate, man. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. So M&A, again, we're going to respect confidentiality. I don't even want to necessarily talk about WatchMojo. This is a framework. So this is where I realized that having studied finance, written about M&A, this is a bit more like native to me than most entrepreneurs. And I spent a lot of my time I just realized there's a fellow entrepreneur that I owe a reply to. He emailed me when I was out of town to New York, but he's like, I have some questions. So this is the thread. So yeah, this is basically, if you could scroll down, but this is what I described now, that this takes you back to the previous 5 or 6 times in 20 years where, we've had M&A talks, very transparent. And the reason I'll explain when we talk about Air Canada, why I became very transparent, but let's show the quadrant if you have it. I think that's the, here. So this is very basic. So if I had to summarize where we're at, there's really 3 types of profiles of the parties who have shown an interest. There are investment funds, institutional investors, who are basically, could be private equity, it could be growth capital. Now, again, we lucked out with like a great, group of people at our private equity, but private equity is a bit different than growth capital, but even, which is a bit more aggressive. But what I realize is it's also different than like when there's a difference between investment funds when it's a lot of like finance professionals with some people that have industry experience versus, let's say you have somebody, I'll use myself because I don't want to name any of the parties. Let's say in 5 years, let's say we sell WatchMojo and I stick around for 5 years, 6 years. I'm loyal, I stay, I build, we tenfold the business value. But eventually I'm like, I want to leave. I go for a year, I just sit there. And then if I then go raise a fund, that's a very different, disposition, risk profile. I'm like an aggressive, experienced, like executive that is now more of a teacher, a mentor, a coach. And I'm looking for like younger versions of myself to really get behind. And I got a Rolodex, and I'm almost going to be more of an executive chairman, So these are more the funds I realized that, to the credit of the investment bank, the Silva Phillips, that they brought. And I love that. Like I actually, it's a shame I didn't get to. Well, Vince McMahon was one. I was pretty transparent.
Mm-hmm.
That's just cool. I probably shouldn't have said anything, but it's kind of a cool story there because he's the quintessential storyteller entrepreneur. There's another fund where it was somebody like him. It was somebody that had built, like, we'll just say like an MTV or ESPN or CNN or CBS or NBC. It was somebody that had this track record. And I was like, yeah, I don't need them to help me 9 to 5 every day. But if I know that I could send them a note, say, hey, I'm looking at a deal, I could do A or B, or my team is bringing me something, I'm hesitant. It's like through osmosis, like just very quickly, they can just give me feedback that I will put a lot of weight on, even if it's not YouTube-esque, even if it doesn't necessarily reflect how Gen Z, or I could adjust that. I could reflect their advice, put it in like a translator, so to speak, and make it more relevant to our reality. But I know that if that person was in the trenches, in the arena, building, whether it was CBS or Fox or WWE, you know what? Like I'll be honest, when somebody sometimes goes, Ash, you wrote something and it seemed a bit like it's a shtick, but if they're like, it seems like you were putting a bit too much mustard on it, somebody like Vince McMahon would understand that. He would be like, Ash, I shaved my head. And like, I saw Stacy Keibler basically do a striptease in front of me. I would not have that issue. He'd be like, Ash, you're too tame. He'd be like, you have to be out there. And I agree. I'm also not one like to go over like common lowest denominator. I once said this to my board, and my it's so transparent. My investor kind of corrected me. I said, look, unfortunately, the benchmark in our industry is sometimes a Dave Portnoy of Barstool, who's like a legend in terms of storyteller entrepreneurs, whether you like him or dislike him. Like, just if you're going to be objective for what he built, that's kind of like, and he was like, yeah, but we wouldn't invest in him. Like, just because, yeah, he might do more crazy antics, because I just did something tame. It was like, I made a comment that was pretty tame, but they were like, is there something you're trying to get off your chest? I'm like, no, it's like it's a shtick. It's a persona. It's like there's LinkedIn Ash, statesman diplomat, then there's an X-Ash. I'm like, that's the asylum. Who do you think is going to show up there? But so I actually really like the investment funds because it's really just a company that's like, we're going to get behind you, and it's a person or people that are just like really, really aggressive, and they really appreciate and value what we've done. They get it. They're like, wow, what you guys and your team have built, rare. Now, I initially was like, well, I don't want to trade the devil I know, our current private, not that they're the El Diablo, but as an expression, I kind of know how they react and think. I wouldn't replace just one PE with another PE. But these investment funds that are basically led by these executives and entrepreneurs, yeah, that I'll take any day. That's interesting. Now, let's not talk about the 3 other axes. The second one are strategic. So this is just like a media company, whether it's a Paramount, whether it's a Vice, whether it's a BuzzFeed, whether it's a Disney. These are strategics, they call them. Like, it's just a media company that's in your field. And if you're in tech, a strategic would be another tech company, to be clear. It's just where they see synergies and they can unlock a lot of value through sales, through partnerships, through distribution, through licensing, through R&D, through innovation. So these I liked a lot. Initially, when this process started, I was looking more for a commercial partner. I wasn't really looking to make a decision based on like profit, like based on money. It was really more like product, purpose, aligned to some, not, look, no, this is really vain. Nobody's going to match my principles of idealism and all that. It's too much. I get that. I will have to change a bit, and I've changed a lot. But what I really wanted was like a commercial partner, because, you know, I've said it. Give me a soldier, we could beat any army. Give me an army, we'll defeat any empire. But I also said one person doesn't do anything. I'm not really going to build WatchMojo into what it could be by adding one salesperson or another international licensor, exec. But if there's a company out there, if there's like an army, I'm like, wow, as a commander of this little army, I could work with their commanders and their generals. And I don't care if my title changes and there's another flag. So that's really interesting. And then the third one are like kind of a hybrid where it's like, you know, I'll use a specific example, and I'm not saying they are in it or not, but it's a clear example. It's like Fortress. The fund ended up taking over Vice out of bankruptcy. So who is calling the shots? That would be a Fortress. But Vice, I mean, okay, Vice is stripped down from what it was a decade ago, but Vice still is like, you know, they have a lot of good relationships. Well, they've also burned some bridges, but, you know, they do have some good relationships with brands, and, you know, they have a lot of expertise in development and production. So we could take all these wonderful ideas that we have for shows and documentaries and podcasts. And what's interesting is they're at a time in their product life or company life cycle where they're like, we like that WatchMojo is efficient, effective, on the ball, and we could kind of get behind them. So as you can see, these three profiles each bring something very unique and different. And it's also, it might limit you. Let's say if you want to do something, let's say we'll use sports. If we're saying under the Vault initiative, where we take a category like sports, and then we take our back catalog and we launch the lineup, and then we go deeper and we build that community, that's a strategy that makes a ton of sense on YouTube. But if Vice is like, well, we're developing Vice Sports, like right now we're all about Vice Sports and Vice News, well, they could be like, sorry, Ash, the lineup is cute, but we're going to take that now. That's all ours. You know, your videos are ours. And I don't have any ego. I'm always like, let's have the conversation. Let's do what's right for the whole, like, stakeholder mindset. Let's do what's right for everybody. So these are all very different. Now, what I realized going into it, I kind of anticipated that axis. That was like, again, like common sense. I also could foresee the other axis, but it became clear. In our conversations and in our management presentations and all that, there are really two different philosophies. One is, WatchMojo, you guys are doing a lot, but you really have, and I believe in comparative advantage, which is a foundation of economic, macroeconomic theory, and I believe in principle of specialization. Plato's Republic is one of my favorite books, shaped a lot of my views, so I do believe in that. Does it make sense for us at this stage? I don't know, but I do believe in it. So they're like, you guys are really good at one or two things. Like, you're good at many things, but you're really, really good and like the best. You're the Wayne Gretzky, the Connor McJesus, McDavid of this. We'd rather you focus on this, and then all this other stuff, either don't do it or do it under an existing brand. You know, like years ago, when we talked to Ziff Davis and they had IGN, well, I understand why they're like, we love WatchMojo, we love Miss Mojo, we like plays, we love it, but we would really prefer if that effort went underneath IGN. We don't see the point of having IGN and something else. And again,
it's hard not to see the logic in that.
That's the thing, and one intangible, again, false modesty aside, is I'm intellectually honest. I'm not these guys that's like, it's my baby, we're not going to do this. No, I'm like, yeah, that conversation takes about 4 seconds. You kind of get it. So that comes with pros and cons. The other one is the go big crowd. The go big crowd are like, Ash, we like you, we like your vision, we like your team, we just like the way you do things, and we understand that because you were still, yes, you had a private equity partner, but you still had to be really, really disciplined, and you kind of would do things, but not with the kind of push, emphasis, velocity really is the word, velocity and intensity, that we would like you to do it, because we still see that you're disciplined. We still see that you're creative who can read a P&L. You're like a person that is still not going to go like burn ungodly sums of money to chase something that isn't there. So we would encourage you to do more. Like, we're not, one gentleman said it, he's like, we're not or people. I'm like, you're not or people? He's like, we're and people. He's like, for us, when you get behind something, we need to be, we're going to do A, B, and C. He said, I mean, later that night at the dinner, he was like, I won't lie. We may not do F, G, and H, but he's like, we definitely are not, pursuing you guys just to do A and B. I was like, interesting. And then, so any questions on this before we talk about BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals from Built to Last? No?
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious, like on this axis, were there any categories of companies or firms that fell more on the focus side or on the go big side? Like, was there any distinction between them, and where you saw more land in one category and more in the other category?
To be honest, it was actually pretty even. But I will say that while it was even in totality, the strategics do prefer not all of them, but not all of them, but strategics tend to buy more expertise. Like, they want you to really do one thing, because they still don't want to, like, we're very, like, we don't care about money in the near term. That's very unique. Like, there's a lot of things about WatchMojo that are very unique that I think as people go work elsewhere and then they come, they realize, which, again, I'm not asking for gratitude, even appreciation, but if it's good if people are aware of that. So that I understand why most people are not like, oh, you're good at these two things, why don't we give you money to burn? Because they would be like, well, we would like to burn that money. Again, I understand. They would be like, well, maybe even if you're more efficient than us, maybe we should do that, right? So there is a tendency, all ceteris paribus, that the strategics want you to focus. But in our case, it depends who the strategic is. As an example, if a Ziff Davis IGN buys us and they're also digital, they're going to want us to focus. But I'm going to use a very generic, let's say if the New York Times buys us or the Washington Post, well, they're going to be like, no, we don't mind if you do more things, because we have no expertise in video.
Yeah.
We're not even that digital, right? So it's case by case. And the investment funds, to be fair, will say that they're all about go big, but the investment funds, even if they got a Vince McMahon, they'll actually be very quickly very bottom line oriented. So that's also a weird thing that I've learned with experience. That's actually very true, that the strategics may out of the gate be like, we just want you to focus. But once you start to execute, they're going to give you the ball. They're going to pass you the ball more. They're going to say, go
more
big.
and more. Yeah.
Whereas the investment funds, I've learned, will come with visions of grandeur and another round of drinks and more oysters and champagne and more martini, top shelf. But then when the tab comes, nobody's
paying for this.
I'm picking up the tab again.
I have to go to the washroom.
No, so it's fine. But that's also business, and this is why we do this video, because nobody writes about this. Okay, so the BHAGs, I'll be honest with you. I won't name them because I'm not stupid there. I don't want to speak on their behalf. There's really only one party that I even felt that was like, Ash, we want you to aim for the fence. Like, your craziest idea in the go big is still a bit tame, a bit lame for us. Like, we want to build the greatest thing ever. So for them, like, I had to really, because I'm very diplomatic, even though people may laugh at that. I told our advisors a few times, I'm like, for these people, I'm going to go and dust off like the vintage collection of wine, like the stuff that the Chateauneuf de Pape, like 1946, Do you know what it feels like to drink half a bottle of ketchup and think you're drinking? No, I'm kidding. Where's that from? Anybody can guess? Ron Burgundy. Sorry. Focus, Ash, focus. So there's one group that I was like, I read what they're trying to do. You really, really need to go big, hairy, audacious goal. So for example, I was like, live production events, scripted shows, yada, yada, which my bankers are sitting there going like, what drugs are you on? Why would you say this? Stick to the focus stuff. But all to say that you have to be careful, because if you actually show how ambitious and how much you aim for the fence, A football coach at a GM may not draft that quarterback, who in the end has this habit of just aiming Hail Mary and connecting, but it still is a dangerous play. So those, I hate to say it, you almost have to keep to yourself, because you're showing people, there's an expression, the tallest grass gets cut first. The most ambitious, the Shah of Iran, he buried he made his bed when he told the Brits, like, we are going to become a top power. We are going to surpass you. Yeah, if you're if you're the UK and you hear that, you're like, we need to kibosh this guy. We'll come and put some guy we could control. You understand? Yeah. So you have to be careful in business. And in a lot of these talks, I don't have anything to prove. I have something to prove to myself. I make it very clear not to wear my ambition on my sleeve and show them that I'm a team player. And if there's a new boss, I don't care. I don't have an ego, because I just want the company to get to the next level. But occasionally you see another crazy person across the table and you're like, let me go take the vintage scotch, the stuff that nobody else can even touch. So there's only one of the companies that I did the B-hacks for, but that's not even Air Canada. Air Canada was just something that happened as a result of the cancellations that led me down the arrogance when the customer service rep was like, you should have read the TNCs. I'm like, really? That's a contract of adhesion. And by the way, this could be a class action. But as I was sitting there, I always go, you have to manage your anger and you have to avoid wrath. Like sins are a normal part. Like you can have feelings of envy, feelings of pride, feelings of greed, feelings of anger, but you don't want it to slide into excess pride, which is hubris, right? Excess anger, which is wrath. That's where you avoid. I say success is 20% what you do, 80% what you avoid. So we could switch gears and talk about Air Canada a little bit, if you want to just bring up the. Sorry, Yvonne.
I wanted to ask one thing though, going back to the to the quadrant. What are some of the caution?
This is not a sextant. This is it's 9. Anyway, I need to look at
What are some of the cautionary tales or red flags just to like keep an eye out for? Because like you said, some people are like, okay, focus. Some people will sell you the moon, but there's got to be like somewhere where you're like in the first meeting, you're like, no, this is not going anywhere. What are some of those like?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there are the same. Okay, I'll give an anecdote because again, I don't like to speak ill of anybody, but there is, sometimes in job interviews where some employee, a prospective candidate, will almost brag about how much they screwed their former employer. And you're like, first of all, why are you telling me this? Second, why do you think this casts you in a good light? And as much as you even try to contextualize it, you're like, yeah, don't say this to me. So there are some companies that sometimes their corporate development executives or their sales guys who then works with the lawyers and the accountants, they will reveal their lack of principles. And not to go back to my pyramid of principles, but like, to me, if your principles are sound and you find your purpose and then you can hire the right people, then you build products and build programming. And eventually over that journey of processes and a lot of P's and patience and all that, you find your profit. The problem is there's way too many people that would sell their mother to the neighborhood pimp for near-term profit. That is a red flag, because you know that they will never have the principle. They never had the principles. Now, you can also be too idealistic. Like I'm extremely like pro-employee and yada, yada, but I'm still realistic that, well, this is a business and you need to be profitable and you need to be independent and you don't want to kind of, so I balance it a little bit. But to me, it's always been somebody that almost not just reveals no principles, but brags about the lack of principles, and also that brags about how they screwed people in the past. I personally find that. And that's the reason why I got upset with Air Canada, because when they canceled my flight, even when I was dirt poor and the company was in debt and losing money, I could put a room on my credit card. I could go rent a car. I could even book a flight with American Airlines or Delta or somebody else, because Canada is a de facto monopoly, but we'll talk about that soon, and make it home. But if you're a single mother, if you're a struggling student, if you're a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, you really like put a screw job in their plans, right? So that's really what bothers me, because also that profile of a person may not know about contract of adhesions, may not know about class and action. Like I right away go, it's not, is it emotional? It's passionate, but I just basically go like, I know what my rights are. And I go, please do this. And I don't want to waste your time nor mine. But a lot of those people just take it, and then it ruins their day, week. They miss out job interviews and stuff. So to me, it does start with principles, and especially if like it's different if like something goes against your principles, but it's a right thing to do for all the stakeholders. versus taking glee in being a thief and a liar and a crook, you know? Cool.
So this leads into your pitch to Air Canada, which I'm assuming you categorize as a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Well, so let me actually preface it, because I did get a lot of friends who are actually like bankers and lawyers, and they're like, again, because they know me, they're like, you know, bravo, great, you know, great idea, but obviously like not going to happen. So let's start with principles and let's start with that. So I'm a proud Canadian. I love Air Canada. I've traveled to like 30 countries, a lot of them with Air Canada. I love the staff. It's a tough job. Sometimes I hear their cries of frustration, but it's rare. They're usually professionals. It's tough to run an airline. I even understand why Canada should have one strong airline. Like I remember the days of Canadian Airlines and Air Canada, like fighting each other. You're weakening each other. Like Canada's not that big. We can't really use WestJet to go Montreal, Toronto type of thing. We don't use that for Sunwing, same thing. Air Transat is great. I've flown Air Transat as well. But so I actually understand the regulatory reality of it. But I would say that post-COVID, you know, Air Canada service has suffered a bit. It's almost, I'm like, is this Rouge, like their discount airline, or is this the flagship? Don't get me wrong. If I'm going somewhere and I'm traveling across the world, if I'm in business and it's a great experience, again, I'm very realistic. Like I never complain. I'm like Louis C.K. You're getting a goddamn tube. You go around the world. Never complain. You can look up my Aeroplan. You'll see I'm a model flyer. It's more the occasional arrogance, the occasional disregard. Like I said, they canceled my flight. Instead of New York, LaGuardia, they flew me through Toronto for me to land at 2 a.m. I'm like, I'm going to be stranded in Toronto. Why didn't you put me on one of these direct flights that you have? Mm-hmm. You know, so that it's like that arrogance. Or canceling my return leg because I took an earlier flight, which again, I'm like, well, you send me 57 emails for surveys, but why wouldn't you notify me saying, sir, we see you did not get on this flight? Like you have the technology.
Yeah. Would you like to cancel your return flight?
Yeah. Or is this, yeah. So my point is really, it's about like unfair, unreasonable. Also, that make no sense for Air Canada. You know, it's not just for me, the consumer. For you, this doesn't make sense. You're creating more of a problem for your employees. Anyway, so when I started to go down the legal, because I like law, I've defended an injunction, I've done settlements, I've freaking helped Google become more equitable by speaking to them in a language and tone that was diplomatic but quite assertive, and they're like, this guy's not kidding. So I like the law. I love the law. It's like it's you know, I understand discovery, and you know, like in discovery, could you imagine if you have a actual valid, not a frivolous claim, and then you ask like in this case Air Canada to be like, we would like every email where you've discussed this policy, you cannot not produce that. That's close to perjury type of thing. So it is a bit embarrassing. It's a tool. It's a bit of a, as they say en bon français, chien, but it's like, it's a tool available to you, right? Because that's how Bill Gates got screwed. He had an email where he said stuff he shouldn't. What I'm getting at though is that's not my principle. I don't like to attack people. I don't like criticizing people, companies or politicians and organizations. But I'm not going to, my default mode is not to go attack Air Canada and the carrier and just create it. You know, that's not. So I was kind of like, okay, at first I said, what if I like feedback and polls. So I started to ask Canadians, like, just give me some feedback. And as the feedback came in, I saw trends and patterns, and I knew my instinct was right. And I was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to email Air Canada and say, look, I'm going to come to you with this feedback. And I'm going to just tell you, I'd rather not do a class action. What's the point? It's a waste of my time. But we're going to present you like 5 things we would like to see you improve. This is like the cries of the country because you are a monopoly. Now, why is it, again, I understand defending and elbows up, but imagine American Air flies LaGuardia to Trudeau in Montreal. Right now, it goes back to some place in America. But why can't it actually fly? If Air Canada doesn't give service to Canadians, why can't American Air flight whatever, plane whatever, actually go Montreal to Edmonton, compete with Air Canada? Why do I have to pay $900 to go to Edmonton, let's say? You know, in the States, it's a bigger market, but there's 5-6 companies. Anyway, so my point was just to present to the board, present to them very respectfully, saying, look, yeah, I'm a consumer advocate. I have a history of doing this. When I worked at Royal Bank, yes, I was an employee of the bank, but I represented the clients when they called to complain. And they said this. I didn't. They said, you're our top customer service guy. So this is stuff I like, but I would just say, yeah, just improve on this. Like, let's engage. Let's have a conversation. Now, they would probably take it and shred it. But as I was just thinking of things to improve in service, I was like, yeah, why did you get rid of En Route? COVID is over. What did that cost? And then I was like, your entertainment. In the past, like Spalfax that produced En Route, they wanted us to give them videos. And actually, some of our videos are definitely on Air Transat. I don't know if some of our videos are on Air Canada or not, but I was like, why aren't we producing videos? Then I was like, it's kind of hard to propose a partnership when you just threaten them to with carrots and sticks. But that's also business. Like, that's when companies do partnerships. So for me, the end goal was, yeah, I'm going to basically propose. And I think people misunderstood. Or let's say, just for purpose of illustration, Air Canada's market value is $6 billion Canadian. I haven't even looked at the debt yet. They have debt for sure. Our market value might be 100 million if we're going to be generous. Like, let's just, be really just to have round numbers. So they're like 50, 60 times more valuable. Now, the reality is, as a finance guy that has like great Rolodex, the companies that have just in the last few years expressed, the funds that have expressed an interest to back us, they have over $500 billion under management. And I'm being conservative because I'm not even including like sovereign funds from parts afar.
So they dwarf Air Canada, basically.
No, what I'm saying is there's enough money slushing around the system that needs to go somewhere for those money managers to earn their management fees of 2%, which is a lot if you place the money. And then you have carry and the success, which is 20% usually. But you only start as a money manager to earn a fee when you, and I know we've been at this for a while, so I'll wrap it up. So the money is out there, but I'm not here to be a savior. I'm not going to do a hostile takeover. First of all, it's Canadian regulatory. Like, it's not like you're going and buying any other business. What I am proposing to them is some kind of like, there's a lot of like people that want to build like media, sports, entertainment. I think media travel, like media entertainment / travel experience, where if you scroll down, so this is a letter to their CEO. If you scroll down and I go basically, wait, stop, no, go up. Sorry, go up. I just want to not be all over. And then we're almost done. So if you go up a little bit more, just a bit more there. Okay, stop there. So Air Canada's travel infrastructure and global brand recognition. Now, they actually carry 47 million passengers a year. In the US, AMC, for purposes of illustration, AMC, which is the largest theatrical outlet, has about 250 million movie viewers per year. But the US is 350 million population. Canada is like 40 or 45. So in Canada, the largest movie theaters, Cineplex, they serve 43 million moviegoers. So Air Canada, that captive audience is larger than the largest theatrical, chain. Hello, massive opportunity. Scroll down a bit. I'm not even talking about other details, which I think underneath, and stop there, sorry. So right now, Air Canada trades at like the whole industry, trade an anemic price to sales ratio, which I fell off my chair. It's like 0.2. And I know why. It's fine. Like, we don't need to get into that. So they trade more as a price to earnings ratio. The debt might be a factor, the regulatory reality that it's basically a monopoly, it's protected, the size of the market, but price to earnings is what investors are willing to pay for $1 of earnings. Air Canada generates $2-3 billion of EBITDA. They're only worth $6 billion. The fact that they're trading at 2 or 3 times, there's a lot of investors that are going to salivate. We historically command 10 times EBITDA. Now we're in media, we're more growth. It's apples and oranges. But most companies, the S&P long-term average is 15, and in good times it goes up to 30. I'm not saying, actually scroll down. I am saying scroll down, all the way down to the comments if you don't mind. So this is basically just a volley. I don't know if I posted. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go down. Oh no, it's so American Airlines, not American Airlines, the company, U.S. carriers, whether it's Delta, American, and we could wrap up soon, they trade like 10 times, 15 times EBITDA. Again, different market, and that's more competitive. So if you think about it, Canada has a monopoly. Air Canada is a monopoly in Canada, and that's fine. I understand that. I'm not here to. If again, I could make that argument to be like, well, yeah, why can't U.S. Air, American Air, fly from Montreal to Toronto, offer that route, and then return to Chicago from Toronto, creating more competition? That's good for Canadian consumers. It might harm Air Canada, but Air Canada could care less about consumers, would be the argument type of thing. I'm sure if anybody from Air Canada is watching this, they're loving it. They just can't wait to invite me to come present to their board. So I basically just said, yeah, I'm not here to be an adversary. Yes, I was a bit disappointed as a client that you messed up 3 out of my 4 flights. But I see this bigger opportunity to create a lot of programming, promote Air Canada. We have all these international channels. We could overnight, imagine if yes, a lot of people returning from Colombia to Canada from Australia, they may take Qantas. But the prices could be pretty even. And if we start promoting Air Canada to all these people, like they reach 40-some million passengers, we reach 100+ million a month all over the world, right? We're probably the biggest digital brand in all of Canada. We have more reach than the Gazette, the Toronto Sun, the CTV, CBCs. I mean, it's our reach is staggering, right? And so all I said was, yeah, I understand I was a bit feisty. Not saying that Michael and Mr. Husso saw that, even the tweets, but I'm like, there is this opportunity to just combine. Now, I'm not interested to go to some. Oh, and then the 51%. So I would basically structure it where Canadian investors would have 51%, and then 49%. I have an idea. I don't want to say it right now, but then 49% could be international. It's not hard to raise $6 billion. It's like, that's not a big amount for a company that generates $3 billion. It's. I'm not saying it's a layup. It's more the regulatory and this and that. And so I'll land by saying all I asked for was. I said I would love to just come and eventually present to your board the vision, because I have the details of what this could look like. And yeah, I think the most likely outcome is more of some kind of joint venture where, I'll say half of it, where we are the tip of the spear for the marketing around content storytelling. But there are certain things around, other things I allude to that I would like to put in front of them again, it's a free world. It's not North Korea. But I think they would be like, yeah, it's not outlandish or crazy. And then they may or may not consider. And that's the point of, I'll land on this. So I'll just say it. One of my advisors, so not the banker, not our investor, one of my advisors, one of the few people actually that I trust, because he actually has built things, no disrespect to the others. He's like, yeah, do you mind not kind of declaring war on Air Canada until we finish this process? I'm like, I'm not declaring war. I'm like, au contraire, I'm pointing to there's this other path. That's not the path I want, which I'm kind of reducing my leverage, because they're like, he's a nice guy. He's not actually going to do this. Although I'm like, yeah, don't be so sure anymore. I'm developing my sadistic nature, not just being a masochist all the time. But I'm like, it's Jeff Bezos' regret minimization theory. I'm like, I want to make sure, because we do have great options now in those 2 first columns of the quadrants.
Yeah.
But I'm like, before I pull the trigger and align myself with any one of these armies, I don't want to look back and go, wow, everybody came, and as much as you were presenting to them, these companies were actually pitching to you because they saw the value of what you and your team built. You could have done something when everybody was zigging. You could have zagged, and you could have actually partnered with Air Canada, for example. And you could have redefined, travel in the 21st century, where, to quote Steve Jobs, the storyteller is the most important person, because they basically set the culture and all that. So it was more of that. And I explained it to him. I said, I'm basically, all these companies are actually asking me to stay. In some of them, I'm going to have to agree to things I don't like, whether it's products or principles. So I go, am I really that unreasonable to want to explore things that I would really get a lot of, not just passion and interest, but that I know that myself and WatchMojo could dramatically help? And I'm like, I work for RBC. RBC is a fine company. Bell Media BC was going to buy us, another fine company. Okay, you might be frustrated with your Wi-Fi one day, but these are great companies. I don't itch to work for those companies, or with those companies. But I love travel. I like service. And I think Air Canada, when I actually look at it, I'm like, Jesus Christ, there's this, you could double the value of this company if you execute properly. So it was more of like an overture. It was more regret minimization, saying, hey, I'm a free agent, so to speak. I'm a proud Canadian. if WatchMojo ends up being acquired by an American and there's no regulatory issues because Bell Media had the choice, Canadian companies and investors had the choice. They don't see it. They don't care. They have other, we have a bunch of Americans who are more commercial minded that they see the gold mine. So I'm like, yeah, before I make that decision, I'm like, I feel like this country that adopted me, I'm giving them the option, and if they don't want me as a free agent, and if they don't see the value of what WatchMojo could build for them, no problem. Then I'll sleep well at night. Nobody could come back and say, man, Ash in the end talked a big game about Canada, blah, 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 but he sold to the Maudits d'Anglais and the Anglos and the Americans, right? So that was the thing. And when I said it to my advisor that way, I like to think he got it, but I'm also gone to a point where I don't really care. This is like, they always, when it's convenient, Ash, it's your company. When it's really convenient for them, they abdicate any responsibility. They abdicate any kind of honor. I'm not talking about anybody specifically. I'm talking about 20 years of push comes to shove, I have to clean the shit. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take your advice, and it's my decision, actually. I'm like, the investors will be happy, the employees will have a new home, but if these people want to shackle me to a radiator, then yeah, I'm going to actually be a little bit more selfish than I usually am and do what I think is best for everybody, including myself. So that was the idea. Now, are they going to get back? I don't think so. I gave them a deadline. My guess is some mid-level person is going to get back to me with like a very vague, I'm not expecting Michael Russo to be like, sure, Ash, let's go have a drink or a bite there. I'm sure he'll be like, make sure there's a restraining order next to this guy, and it's their loss. But they'll probably get back to me because I think they realize, yeah, this guy could. I think they're already facing a class action lawsuit. So,
I do see another option in the cards though, which is Air Mojo. You start a competitor.
Air Mojo.
Well, you know what? When WatchMojo was not as successful as it is now, like this is a long time ago. When I first flew Porter, I reached out to them as well, and I said, I think you guys have a great service, and it's like early. I go, nothing against Air Canada, but I was like, there's no way Air Canada is going to get back to me, and I was like, I would love to. I would love to help you guys, and they never even replied to me, and I think Porter isn't what it used to be or was. It's just not because of us. That's not what I mean. It's really hard. My point is Air Canada has a lot of assets. Air Canada still has, I think Air Canada should be the most valuable Canadian brand in the world. Just think about the goodwill. Think about the people that come to Canada on this red bird. It's like, they'd be like, I have so much affinity to this brand. And I think they're squandering that. Air Canada is not even in the most valuable top 10 brands in Canada, or they're like most admired or most, they're not. When I looked at the list, I was like, they're probably third, second. And I was like, I'd like to get you number one. And now I'm like, come on, guys. Anyway, so I am ambitious, but I'm not crazy. I don't think I want to start an airline, but I would love to help and support them if they see the value. And if they don't, all good,
Yep. It's an interesting thought, and I'm just, not to drag this on longer than it needs to be, but you have like Netflix exclusive shows, Disney exclusive shows.
Yes.
You could have an Air Canada exclusive show. You can only watch it if you fly Air Canada.
Yes. Okay. So that's some of the programming. The other programming you could also actually sell to others, so you generate revenue. You sell a show to Netflix. We have developed so much content. Game shows, scripted, trivia, just our trivia engine. Could you imagine you're just sitting there using, there is so much. Like I'm trying to minimize what I ideally would like to share with them. There is so much we could do because you have this captive audience. So you could both sell first to another platform and then it's your own IP now, right? After a certain window. Or yes, you have exclusives that then after an initial period, like going to Cineplex or AMC, that then you license to, so you recoup your investment like that. But to them, obviously, if they're generating 20 billion in revenue, they don't care about that, but it's a mistake because this revenue trades at a higher multiple. And that's how you go from being worth $4, $5, $6 billion to being $10 billion and 15 billion. And I could do that, not because I'm special, but because you do need that media. You do need that other business that they just don't have. Anyway, hopefully next week I'm still here and not like in custody or something, but I'm just kidding.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. I hope you do get a responance, and I'm curious to know what
and
that is.
I am good with confidentiality. That's what I do want to stress. Like, I think once people engage with me, then I'm like, now I have to go off the grid. It's like until people get back to me, I'm like, I can more or less say something just to get their attention. But then once I engage with people, then I'm a pro. Then I become like a very conservative, boring executive. All right.
Well, regardless
Thank
of what
you, guys.
happens, interesting times for WatchMojo ahead. And I want to thank both of you guys. It's been a real pleasure doing this series with you. And
Likewise.
yeah, it's great to wrap it up this way. And I hope that I see you guys in another podcast around the bend sometime.
Yeah.
More expectations. So long as I'm not on the no-fly list with Air Canada, I'll take it. I'm kidding.
All
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.